We join the action from move number 6 between Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura. This is the position that has been reached from the Rui Lopez. The last move was castles here, and then d6 c3 played by Hikaru. So this is standard d3 Rui Lopez, and let's get into the groove now. What's happening here is that Hikaru has just played his pawn to c3 and Fabi castles. Now here white is always looking for the right moment to hit with d4. So Hikaru first goes rook e1, and a very standard move that he's defending the e4 pawn. And here the main move is bishop a7 or something of that sort, but here Fabiano plays a relatively lesser played move, knight e7, and his point is that after d4 he wants to go back, and if you take here he wants to go knight g4, attacking here and defending this. So that's the reason why here knight d2 was played, and now Caruana plays knight to g6. So this transfer of the knight from c6 to g6 is definitely something that black is happy about, because the knight is much more useful there. Hikaru also transfers his knight to the g3 square, so it's a very slow positional game that's developing here. Caruana now has to decide what his next plan is going to be. He can wait with bishop a7, but he goes for direct play with d5, and it's a very daring move, because in a way your e5 pawn starts to get a little bit soft here. So let's say, for example, after pawn takes pawn, you will have an attack on e5 from the rook and the knight. You can see there Hikaru a little bit confused with Caruana's decision of playing d5, but actually Fabi has made quite a good decision. He takes pawn, and now you can take with the queen but also with the knight. So Caruana takes with the knight, and the point is, if you take knight e5, there is an intermediate bishop f2, because after take, if you take back with the rook, a check and you lose the rook. So that's the reason why Caruana took here with the knight, bishop b3 played by Hikaru, and c6 by Caruana, just very solidly supporting his knight in the center of the board. Now Hikaru pushes his pawn to d4 and tries to strike in the center. Fabi takes it, and you can take back with the pawn as well, but Hikaru prefers to take with the knight. It's a symmetrical position, black is active, so is white, it looks completely even. But in such positions you have to be careful. Hikaru is very good at such simple positions. He likes to grind. Knight f6 played here by Caruana, and he's saying that now I want to take and give you an isolated pawn. If you try to defend it this way, my knight is going to jump here. So that's the reason why Hikaru plays h3, stopping it. But after bishop takes d4, now it's a very committal decision by Caruana. He's given up his bishop pair, but he's given white an isolated pawn. So the knight can now sit here comfortably, but Hikaru is happy about the fact that he now has the bishop pair. So this bishop can move, this bishop can come on this diagonal. So there is pros and cons for both the things. Now the bishop goes to c2, takes this beautiful long diagonal that is there, and it does feel that white has a slight initiative here. But Caruana says, I'm extremely solid, my knight cannot be pushed away, I've got my bishop here, my knight is sitting on g6, knight comes to g3. Now the f5 square is a very good square for the knight, so it is looking at that square along with the bishop here. And Caruana jumps into f4 before that. Now definitely the bishop is looking at it, but the knight is well protected. Also you have to consider some sacrifices that can happen on h3 and g4. Hikaru plays his rook to e4, attacking the knight. Very important moment. Now the knight has to move. You can even defend it with queen d6, but Caruana prefers to go back with the knight to d5. And now Hikaru goes a3, and a logical move. He's stopping the knight from jumping here. Rook e8 played. So both the players making very normal logical moves that are there in the position. and bishop d2 played. Now the bishop is very well positioned here. Maybe it's looking at these squares. Knight f6 played by by Caruana, and Hikaru needs to move his rook. But if he moves his rook away, then d4 pawn would hang. So therefore he pins the knight, and Caruana immediately asks the question that, hey, move your bishop away. So Hikaru takes, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, and quite a standard position here. He plays queen to d2, and I was now wondering if bishop d5 is any good. You know, it's a decent move putting the bishop there. Black doesn't seem to have any real issues. Caruana goes queen g5, and he's offering a trade. If you take, I think black is fine completely. So Hikaru prefers to bring his rook back, which is tricky because somewhere, you know, he is stopping the trade and also wanting to bring his rook to the e file. Caruana jumps in with the knight. Also, he's down to 13 minutes. He has to make 15 more moves, while Hikaru has 35 minutes. And here Hikaru comes up with an amazing move, h4. The point is, if you take here, he wants to go rook e4, g5, rook e1, and then control completely the f5, h5 squares. It's amazing, this move, h4. Queen d5 played here by Caruana, and now he moves his rook to attack the knight. There's an interesting move, knight takes g2, because if you take here, f5 will win material. So you have to find a move like queen c3, which traps the knight here. So very complex position. But after this, Caruana moved his knight backwards. Hikaru quickly brought in his rook, and now with the growing time trouble, which is 12 minutes for 12 moves, and also the fact that Hikaru's pieces look more active, I think Caruana is in some trouble. He goes knight f8. You will see that this knight, which was beautifully placed on f4, in 2 moves has gone back to f8. Rook e5 attacks the queen. The queen has to move away, but where exactly should the queen go is the question. And maybe Caruana can go back to d7, but he goes d8. So you can see how one by one all of black's pieces are being sent back, and Hikaru is nodding his head. He's enjoying himself. He's clamped down the structure with h5. The bishop is beautifully positioned. The queen can come up, and now bishop d7 played. The bishop goes back. The rook can be traded once. I think Hikaru will do that. Rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, and now knight to f5. What a beautiful knight, which can never be kicked away. Looks at this key squares here. Caruana moves his queen to f6, and Hikaru plays queen b4. Very cool move, attacking b7, but there's another big threat that is there in the position, which is a check here. King moves, and then the f8 knight would be hanging. So he plays b5, which is a massive blunder. You can see there Hikaru looking at, he knows, he's seen the kill here. He goes knight e7 check, and you can also see from Caruana's face that he knows that the writing is on the wall. King h8, and now the key move, knight d5, attacking the queen and the knight here. And imagine if you take this knight, this is a checkmate. Caruana resigns here, and Hikaru scores an extremely important win, which takes him to 4.5 points now out of 8. Caruana, who was on 4, remains there. Hikaru has jumped him, and he's now just half a point behind the leaders. What a phenomenal comeback by Hikaru after losing the second round to Vidit. He's now in full flow, and it's not going to be easy to stop him to his journey towards the World Championship title.